Even by the standards of high-concept 80s flicks, there's a lot of dark, unsettling stuff in Big that gets brushed under the rug. So dust off your floor piano, grab a soda from the vending machine you bought for your loft, and settle in to learn what's so messed up about Big. The first truly upsetting moments of Big hit the screen well before Josh Baskin gets started with his age-changing shenanigans. Instead, it comes from a short but truly upsetting bit involving Josh's best friend Billy and his absolutely miserable family situation. In a scene that lasts less than a minute, we see Billy's family gathered around the table for dinner, sitting in browbeaten silence as Billy's mom pounds the table and shouts about how terrible they are. We even see Billy himself quietly serving dinner to the entire family, even as his mom makes her clearly false point about how the family never helps her with anything. The way the rest of the family acts seems to indicate that this is a pretty regular occurrence around the dinner table. But the worst part? Billy himself, who gathers up a plate of food and leaves without even a sideways glance from his mom. The point of this entire scene seems to be to establish why 13-year-old Billy can go to New York City after school every day without anyone bothering to ask why, but it also makes you wonder why he couldn't have been the one who made a wish instead of Josh. If he'd suddenly found himself in the body of an adult, it's doubtful that he'd ever come back home, and it really makes you wonder if anyone would have missed him. By the end of the movie, Josh starts to realize that getting his wish to be big is actually a bad thing, but maybe there's a reason for that. If Zoltar has the mystical power to transform Josh into a 30-year-old, then it probably could have made things a lot easier for him once he found himself in his new body, too. It could have given him some clothes that would fit rather than just adult-sized underoos, for instance, or provided a driver's license. The thing is, the Zoltar machine doesn't start up with its wish-granting magic until after Josh starts angrily slapping and punching the machine in the throes of a teenage temper tantrum. It stands to reason that Zoltar's particular methodology here is less about granting a wish and more about getting that sweet revenge. Forget about whatever moral this movie is trying to teach us about growing up too fast. The real takeaway here is to treat vending machines with respect, a lesson Josh never learns. Speaking of things that Zoltar could have done to make Josh's adult life a little easier, maybe it could have changed his mom's memories so that she didn't try to kill him with a kitchen knife the moment she saw him standing in her house. The scene where Josh first tries to explain that he's been magically transformed into a grown man is played for laughs, but imagine seeing this scene from Mrs. Baskin's perspective. She's going about her day when a strange man shows up in her house looking disheveled and confused, starts talking about her son, and then drops his pants. Is it any wonder she seems convinced that he's definitely a kidnapper, and possibly something much, much worse? That's not the only time we see her reaction either. While Josh is off dancing on keyboards and sleeping on a trampoline, we see his parents in tears pleading with the police to find their son. The moment she turned around to see Tom Hanks standing in her kitchen ranting like a madman is probably going to stand out as the most traumatic moment of her life. Imagine having a panic attack every time you saw David S. Pumpkins, and you'll start to understand how harrowing that could be.
Any questions?
Yes! Several!
Soon after landing his grown-up office job, Josh calls his mom and, as her son's kidnapper, assures her that Josh is just fine and that he'll be back in a month or so. There's one additional wrinkle this time around, though. See, kidnapping is a federal offense, meaning that if the Baskin family reported their missing child in the break-in from the mysterious pants dropper, which they did, then the FBI would have gotten involved. If true crime documentaries and Law & Order SVU have taught us anything, it's that one of their first steps would be recording and tracing any phone calls on the chance that the kidnappers call for ransom. So why isn't the next scene a bunch of armed cops and FBI agents storming into the Macmillan Toy Company offices looking for a kidnapper who was dumb enough to call from a job he got using the missing child's name? There were probably a lot of questions to answer around the office in the days after we stopped following the story. One of the most tragic scenes in the entire film comes toward the end after Josh has seemingly embraced his larger life and forsaken his old pal Billy. As Billy is feeling sorry for himself for being snubbed by his friend, we get a scene where he interacts with Mrs. Baskin. You know, the woman who's afraid her son might be dead, which Billy knows for a fact is not true. The scene involves Mrs. Baskin sitting in Josh's room alone, holding the present that she got him for his birthday, a birthday she thinks he missed because he's been kidnapped. Billy, on the other hand, knows full well that Josh had a perfectly fine birthday because he was there at the party. The only real cause for alarm is that he's celebrating with his 28-year-old girlfriend, which is bad, but still a lot better than dead and buried in an unmarked grave. The truth might be tough to explain, but at least it wouldn't prolong her suffering. Instead, we just get this.
Everything's gonna be okay.
While most of the drama we see in Big comes from watching as the naive Josh tries to navigate through adulthood, it's worth noting that he's occasionally in some very real danger. Not only does his mom pull a knife on him, he also winds up staying in a rundown flop house with a constant background noise of screaming and gunshots. It's even bad enough that he feels compelled to barricade the door before curling up on a moth-eaten mattress to cry himself to sleep. That raises the question, though. What if his mom's protective instinct had driven her to sink that knife into adult Josh's chest? What if he'd been mugged or caught by a stray bullet? What if he'd fallen off his indoor trampoline and cracked his head open? What if Josh had died while he was, big? Are we operating under werewolf rules where he'd turn back into his true childish form, leaving his mom shocked to see that she'd accidentally stabbed her own son? Or would his body have stayed as it was, leaving the grown-up Josh as an inexplicable and unidentifiable corpse? Either way, it's a pretty grim situation to contemplate. While Josh has plenty of problems negotiating stuff like formal dinners and business meetings, there are a few aspects of adult life that he manages to sail through without any sort of problems at all, and they're arguably the most important parts of being a grown-up. He aces a job interview, quickly secures a promotion for a salaried position with benefits, and then takes his first paycheck and gets a gigantic studio apartment in Manhattan. All of this despite the fact that he definitely wouldn't pass a credit check, gives everyone a name that's probably also on the news as a missing and possibly kidnapped child, and can't even put down his correct social security number.
There's a couple of numbers missing on your social security.
Oh, 12.
Okay, so maybe that's not that dark. Unless, of course, you're a millennial watching this movie with the 3 roommates you have in your 800-square-foot apartment in between your 5-gig economy jobs. Promotions? Job interviews that result in an instant hire? A steady salary that allows you to afford the deposit on a Manhattan apartment and furnish it with a gimmicked Pepsi machine? The 80s might have been some kind of cocaine-fueled wonderland, but today, this whole work situation is even less believable than the magic carnival machine. When Josh gets his job at the toy company, his first encounter with a coworker comes from Scotty, a cubicle mate played by John Lovitz. His appearance is brief, but it does serve to provide some insight to the sleazy world of office politics in 1988. After introducing himself and advising him to slow down so he doesn't get anything done too fast and raise his employer's expectations, Scotty points to a female coworker and advises Josh that he should immediately have sex with her. No, seriously.
Say hi to her and she's yours. She'll wrap her legs around you so tight you'll be begging for mercy.
Well, I'll stay away from her then.
This is the very first conversation Scotty has with his coworker, or that anyone has with Josh at his brand new job. Not only is that a completely insane way to greet a new hire, even for the 80s, it also indicates that the Macmillan Toy Company is a whole new level of hostile environment for the women who work there. If this is the way the people at this job act, it's no wonder that Susan falls for Josh immediately, since he's the only one who isn't acting like a cartoon wolf during business hours. Josh's biggest obstacle at work is Paul, a scheming rival toy executive who is way more evil than that description would otherwise imply. For the most part, his evil machinations are limited to trying to sabotage Josh's pitch for a new toy, but there's one scene where he gets suddenly and unexpectedly violent. Presumably hoping to better know his enemy, Paul takes Josh to a racquet-ball court, briefly explains the rules of the game, and starts a match. When Josh correctly points out that Paul screwed up a serve, however, Paul's smirking confidence immediately turns into shouting, swearing, and shoving. There's nothing in between, just an explosive outburst of rage that finds him spewing insults and even wrestling Josh to the ground over a racquetball game. In the movie, the passing pedestrians are delighted by a fistfight breaking out, but we in the audience know that Josh is a literal child being screamed at and physically assaulted by an adult. For a slapstick comedy, that's pretty uncomfortable to watch. Big clocks in at over 2 hours, presumably because they needed those scenes of Billy's abusive mom and Mrs. Baskin quietly mourning her son, but by the end of it, we get a happy ending where Josh returns home, back to his normal age. His mother is overjoyed to see that her son is alive, and Susan returns to Manhattan, tying everything up with a heartwarming bow. Except that we're left wondering what happens after. Josh cannot possibly explain where he's been to his family or the police, who are all under the impression that he was kidnapped, with the evidence of his phone calls home to back it up. Does he make up a story? Does he just clam up? Does he actually try to convince his mom and the authorities that magic is real and he was the victim of a curse handed down by an inanimate object? No matter what he chooses to tell or not tell, that kid's definitely winding up in therapy. And what about Susan? When the adult Josh Baskin suddenly disappears, leaving behind an empty apartment full of toys and a set of bunk beds, she's going to be questioned by the cops as his girlfriend. What's she going to tell them? How does she talk about Josh's disappearance without either sounding completely out of her mind or like she's covering up a murder, or both? And that's not even considering that she has to confront the fact that she fell in love with a 13-year-old child and had sex with him while he was in his own magic future body. That's a whole lot to deal with while you're trying to avoid being arrested. And then there's what happens as time goes on. Eventually, some true crime aficionado is going to figure out that these two strange unsolved cases both involve someone named Josh Baskin, happening in the same area at the exact same time. In the world of Big, there's no way that there aren't at least 3 documentaries and an episode of My Favorite Murder about this. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more grunge videos about your favorite obsessions are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.